I'm Holly Cummins. I should say as well, you'll notice that there's two names here. One of them is my name, one of them is not my name. This talk was originally developed with Martijn Verburg, who many of you will know as the diabolical developer. I sort of optimized him out of the process, but these are his slides as well, so please do give credit to him as well. But as I said, I'm Holly Cummins. I'm an IBMer. I work in the IBM Cloud Garage. And when I say that, the first question from a lot of people is, well, what even is a cloud garage? And we're a part of IBM who's dedicated to innovation, to helping customers take advantage of the cloud, use the cloud to solve problems that have never been solved before, which is really cool. We're just like the Voxed family, we're growing. So we have a map of our locations. And this map is an absolute pain because every time I show it, it's wrong because a new one has sprung up. So we're up to about 15 now. And in particular, we're coming to Milan real soon now, in the next month or two. So I don't have a picture of it, but there's the IBM Client Center, which is somewhere cool and looks really cool, and we're going to be in there. So that's sort of exciting. But the reason why I'm talking about the Cloud Garage is one of the things that we do in the garage is we have what we call the garage method. And that's a collection of a whole bunch of things that we believe to be best practices when you're doing any kind of software or technology work. So some of it is stuff like lean startup. All of that optimizing for feedback is really important. Some of it is design thinking, that focus on the user. Some of it is your engineering practices, your test-driven development. We really believe in co-creation. So we've got a whole bunch of these practices. And one of our practices is a fun work environment. So what that means is that I'm actually a fun professional. Fun is part of my job description. So you may be thinking, because I know Mario said that all of the talks here were not fluffy, and you may be thinking that fun surely is the fluffiest talk of all. But actually, no. So there's sort of a language distinction here. This is not a fun talk. This is a talk about fun. Those two things are quite different. So no fun here, only thinking about fun. Because fun, fun's really important. And because fun is really important, you have to take fun very seriously. So we have a very strict plan on how to achieve fun. Because again, we don't want to be fluffy. This is important, so let's take it seriously. So the first thing is that how do you know you're having fun unless you measure it? So you need fun metrics. And you need to quantify and qualify those fun metrics, and then you need to be checking them all of the time. That's probably, if you have something that you're measuring, you need to have someone who takes ownership of that. So you need a CFO, and that's not the chief financial officer, that's the chief fun officer, but those two are equally important. Gamification is really important. That's a great way of achieving fun. So gamify your daily tasks to make them more fun. And I don't mean gamify some of your daily tasks to make them more fun. I mean gamify every single one of your daily tasks to make it more fun. If this isn't happening, then your chief fun officer can be, measuring your compliance with this, seeing how many of your tasks are fun and finding the ones that aren't fun. It's all about how you interact with your colleagues. It's about your body language. So high-five your colleagues every day to make the workplace more fun. Don't high-five them once, high-five them 2 times, 3 times, 5 times, 6 times. Again, your chief fun officer can be measuring this. It's about how you set up your office environment. So you probably want things like a ball pit. Now you may find some people feel a little bit uncomfortable and awkward going in a ball pit at work. You guessed it, that's where your chief fun officer comes in. They can measure your ball pit compliance. It's about the language that you use as well. So what we really like to do is we like to have a fun word of the day, like octopus or orangutan. And we like to just use that word whenever we can. Like, have you injected the orangutan defect yet? And again, you guessed it, chief fun officer can measure the compliance for this. Give gold stars to the people who are using the fun word of the day most. Because again, it's about that reward. It's about making sure that people know that they're supposed to be having fun and that they're going to be in trouble if they don't have fun. And it's about how you present yourself at work. So, a while ago we did the shift from boring suits to, casual hoodies. But we need to go, as an industry, we need to go one step further than this. We need to wear clothes that are fun. Maybe bell bottoms, maybe Elizabethan costumes, maybe clown suits, something that makes it clear to everyone around you that you take fun seriously. And you may find that some people, like all cultural changes, some people may be a bit uncomfortable with this change, and they may be resistant to the change. So if that happens, they're part of the problem, not part of the solution. And you can identify those people by having fun assessors for each team, because at this point, you've got so much fun going on in your company that it's going to be, way more work than the chief fun officer can do that on their own. So you need individual, autonomous teams taking responsibility for their own fun with their own fun assessors in each team. And again, everything shows that laughing out loud has a great effect. So laugh out loud as many times a day as you can. Have the chief fun officer and the team assessors track this and give gold stars to the people who are laughing the most. So I should say as well, the first time I gave this talk, this slide ended up on Twitter without any context. And then I saw a tweet that said, oh, well, that's just typical IBM, isn't it? They take something like fun and they turn it into this. So please, if you do tweet this, put the context in that says, this isn't how to have fun. This is the worst way to have fun. This is how to take something that's nice, like fun, and how to turn it into something that's horrible. But let's step back and let's talk about you, and let's talk about your career and why you're here. And in particular, it's a little bit different because it's on a Saturday. But for those of you, who sort of had the conversation with your boss where you said, boss, you've got to send me to Vox Milan because there's going to be all these great talks. You probably picked up, like distributed caches or, Graal VM or something. And you probably didn't say, boss, you need to send me to Vox Milan so that I can learn how to have fun. Because, we sort of have this idea that we don't talk about fun at work, and it's a slightly scary thing. And this is true for all of us. So this is my LinkedIn profile, and I listed a few specialties, and I actually did not list having fun at work. So even though I'm speaking on the subject of fun, right, like, if someone wanted to know that I was interested in fun, they wouldn't have to Google very much to find it, but I still don't put it on my LinkedIn profile because it still seems like, oh, fun's a bit unprofessional. And, if you look at, I picked this one, but, if you look at any kind of career exam advice, you'll see a whole bunch of things about, how to be successful at work and, words that you should put. If you're applying for a job, you should say that you organized these things and that you strengthened this and that you initiated that. And nowhere should you say on your cover letter for a job, well, I really like to have fun at work. And this is sort of so sad because we keep fun a secret. We all probably like to have fun at work, but none of us actually stand up and say, this is important, this matters to me, and things are going to be better if we do this. So then the question is, well, why is fun this sort of weird thing that we all kind of like, but we all kind of pretend that we don't like? So then to answer that question, it's good to sort of step back and say, well, what exactly is fun? So this is my favorite definition of fun. Nobody else likes this definition of fun, but remember, fun means jokes. And see, this is a fun guy, and it's a mushroom is a fun guy, and it's really funny. And yeah, maybe not. So if you're stepping away from the mushrooms into a slightly more technical definition of fun, fun is a point on the intersection of engagement levels and social interaction for a given activity. Now, some of you who don't have English as a native language may be looking at that and thinking, I don't understand that at all. English is my native language. I don't understand that at all. So I'm not sure it's the most helpful definition of fun. And it turns out that if you look into fun, just like everything, there's a whole bunch of people whose job it is to research fun. And I think that's a bit like the 20-step guide to fun, that if fun is your job and researching fun is your job, that just drains all the fun away. And you end up talking an awful lot about fun while not actually having fun. And you go to parties and people say, so what do you do? And you say, I research fun. And people say, oh, that's got to be really interesting. And you say, no, actually, it's not. It's a job. So even anything, if you do it as your job, it can become unfun. So there's lots of papers about fun. I'm not sure how helpful they are for understanding fun. So another way of thinking about it is in terms of your classic Maslow hierarchy of needs. So at the bottom, we have physiological needs, like I need to sleep and I need to eat, and things are going to go really wrong if I don't. One up from that is things like safety. I want to have a house where I'm safe and I don't get rained on, and where burglars don't come in. And then towards the top, we end up with things like social. I want to have friends. I want to be liked. I want to feel like I'm a good person myself. And then at the top is this sort of fuzzy thing of self-actualization. And fun happens at those top three. So social things are fun. That sort of, doing things that make us feel good about ourselves, those are generally fun. Whereas the bottom ones, not really so much about fun. So like everything, fun can be measured. So going back to that earlier definition where it's the combination of the social interaction and how engaged you are, you can plot that. And if you plot it, what you get is the funtinuum. So if you remember one thing from this talk, remember the funtinuum. And the reason for that is not because it's especially useful, but just because it's fun. So another way of thinking about fun, because I sort of look at that and I think, well, that doesn't really help me think about what fun is or how I should be having fun or anything about fun. So I started thinking about a taxonomy of fun instead. And so at one end, down at the bottom, we have exploration. So that's focused investigation. Next, we have play. Play is very flexible, and play is something that you do just for its own sake. Another way of having fun is a puzzle. So unlike play, a puzzle has a definite goal and a definite rules. There's also games. Games are similar to puzzles, but a puzzle is solved and a game is won. So a game has that element of having a winner. And then finally, we have work. And you may be thinking, well, all of the rest are fun, and work isn't really so fun. But of course, work can be incredibly satisfying and incredibly rewarding and incredibly fun. And even things that maybe don't seem especially fun, if we approach them in the right way, can be fun. So I got a message last night, and my son had decided to tidy his room, which, if there's one thing that children hate doing, it's tidying their room. But I think because he decided to do it himself, he got that room spotless, and he was so happy. He was like, this is the best thing ever. Look, I've tidied the room. And because he'd chosen to do it, even though it was an activity, there's no game in tidying the room. There's no puzzle in tidying the room. It was just straight work, but he'd really enjoyed it. But let me talk a bit more about some of these other types of fun. So exploration is one of the first things that we do as children, and it's something that we continue to do as adults. So what I've got here, is I've got a sensory toy that you give to a baby, and what the baby will do is, it will hit the thing and it will go, ooh, that makes a noise, and it will spin the thing and it will go spins, and it's all about that feedback. It's all about seeing what things do. If we look at something like a puzzle, a puzzle is different because a puzzle when you've solved it. And so the same son who tidied his room has got obsessed with Rubik's Cubes. And so we managed to solve the Rubik's Cube the other day. And it was the best thing ever. And we were dancing around the house because it was just such a thrill to solve this puzzle. Play, on the other hand, you don't really know when you've solved play. Play is just something that you do. So a lot of children, they'll have the toy animals and they'll have the cars, and they'll just be going sort of ding, 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 ding around. And you sort of, there's not rules, but whatever they're doing, they're really enjoying it. And they're not exploring because they know what the toy cars do. They know what the little zebras do. But they still are really getting something out of doing things with them. Games, of course, are way more structured. Games have rules. Games have a winner. And so football is a classic game. Of course, we have board games, all sorts of different games. And with games, there's a really strong social aspect as well, because there's two parts to the social aspect. One is that you do it with someone else, which is nice because you're interacting, and the other one is you win, which is even better because you were better than that other person. So then, you've got that esteem part of the Maslow hierarchy. And for work, I couldn't really find a good picture for work. But, like I said with the example of the room tidying, we shouldn't think of work as something that's really different from all of the others. So work has a goal, and it doesn't have a winner, and work is never really solved. But a lot of these activities that we do, like tidying the room, they can be enjoyable. But all of that is still probably quite complicated and detailed as a way of thinking about fun. Because you can actually, you can go away from the funtinuum and you can go away from these types, and you can really bring fun down to something way more simple, which is called positive affect. And another way of thinking about positive affect is that it feels good. It's something that you enjoy. Are people smiling? Are people happy? If so, they're probably having fun. So how does all this relate to Vox? Why are we talking about Lego and puzzles and room tidying at a technical conference? Well, the reason is because programming is fun. We're really lucky that we get to program because it is so fun. And I think part of the reason it's so fun is because it combines that logical problem-solving aspect with that creativity where we're making things and we're creating things where there wasn't a thing before, and that's really cool. Another way of thinking about it is that when we're programming, we get to control stuff. And if you think about the examples that I had before, again, a lot of those, they were about doing something, controlling something, and getting the feedback. So when the baby is, with the rattle or with the sensory toy, they do something, and then something happens, and they're sort of going out into the world and seeing how the world behaves. And when we do Hello World, it's pretty much exactly the same thing, right? There's that excitement of, I did it, and then the computer said, hello world, this is the best day ever. And with a puzzle, when we have this challenge, like a Rubik's Cube, and we know there's a way to solve it, and we can't figure it out, and we can't figure it out, and we can't figure it out, and then we figure it out, and it feels so good. And when we have, that nasty problem, and we can't figure it out, and we can't figure it out, and then you find the solution, and that's like the best thing, and then you run, and you're like, yay, I fixed it. And that's proportional to how bad the defect is as well. So like a problem that takes you 2 minutes to solve, well, that feels good. A problem that takes you 2 days to solve, that's the most amazing feeling when you finally get it working. And there's a really strong game aspect as well, and I'll talk a bit more about this later on, but if even something like a velocity tracking, or taking the little work items and sliding them from left to right across the board. There's that game element there where we're saying, I want to make the velocity higher, and if I break this story up into 2 stories, I can make my velocity higher because I've just cheated and I've just gamed the system, and there's sort of a lot of aspects like that. So I'll come back to the games, and I won't go through every part of the fun taxonomy, but I think those parallels are really important, that everything that children do with their toys is pretty similar to what we do as grown-ups with our computer programs. And the effect is really similar as well. So this is just in the news this week. And I love this photo, because this is Katie Bowman. And the photo is when she has everybody seen this, by the way? Does everybody know what this is? So this is the photographs of the black hole that were released this week. And it was years worth of work and terabytes of data. And what's happening here is I think this is the moment that they managed to get on film when she realized that her algorithm for imaging a black hole actually worked. And I saw a tweet about this, and the tweet said, it sparks joy. And that's exactly it. You look at her, and just that feeling of, it works, it works, it works, I made it work. And that's so exciting. It's the exact same thing, that it feels really good. So this is all amazing, right? Like, we're so lucky. We get to be computer programmers. We get to do all this fun stuff in our jobs. There's no problem, right? Well, sort of. It turns out that many of us, despite the fact that there's all these fun activities that we could and should be doing at work, and we can be doing Hello World and fixing bugs, we end up with these workplaces that are maybe not actually really fun. And a lot of this, I think, stems back to when we think about, the management model in the 1980s and 90s, it was this really command and control management model. It was, I'm going to put in an org chart, and I'm going to put in a hierarchy, and people are going to do what the person one above them does, who's going to do what the person one above them does. And it's, pretty strict, it's pretty inflexible, and it has to be said, it's not a lot of fun. And this model, we really associate it with the 1980s and 90s, but it's actually a much, much older model. The military were pretty much the first large-scale modern employers. Before that, people would be working, but they'd be working either, in a small household or, on a subsistence farm or on a craft, and it would be a fairly localized. But the military would have thousands of people that they were employing, and, they'd get a salary, and they would have to do what they were told. And this is particularly important for the military, because in the military, there's usually two things that you're doing. One is you're killing people, which isn't particularly pleasant, and the other is you're being killed, which is even less unpleasant. So if you have an employment structure where you have to tell people to either go out and kill people or be killed, you really need a structure that has you will do what you're told as its core, because otherwise people will say, well, no, actually, I don't want to do that. That doesn't seem like very much fun. But it turns out as well that even the military are actually changing from this command and control structure, and they now are doing sort of much more autonomous missions where a team will get a mission goal and they'll need to figure out how to implement it. And there's another thing that feeds into our fear of fun as well, I think. And this has to do with a lot of the cultural background that we had in Europe a couple of hundred years ago, really with the Puritans and with similar movements sort of elsewhere in Europe. And really what a lot of those were teaching is that if you have fun, then that means you're a bad person and you're going to go to hell. And I think a lot of that teaching, it got so embedded in our culture that we still, even if rationally, we would say, well, no, actually, I think I am allowed to have fun, and that doesn't guarantee that I'm going to go to hell. We still have this little fear that says, oh, but I know that fun is bad, and bad things happen to people who have fun. And this is really sad because there is a huge amount of value in fun. And even in the workplace, there's really a lot of value in fun. So this is my team, by the way. We were having fun. And this is the IBM IOT Center in Munich. And the reason I have this photograph is because, this sort of looks like a very IBM-y building, in terms of it's huge, it's corporate, it's very glassy. But if you go into that building, what you see is a sign that says, you must take the time to play, to be creative. And they've got that sort of as art on the wall. And I just love the fact that they had this building and they said, what we're going to talk about in this building is the fact that we really value play, because that's important. And we want everybody who comes in here to know that play is a really important part of that engineering process. Now, of course, this is the IoT Center. And so that, there does sort of get to be some play there. And in particular, they're co-located with BMW. So they've got a partnership with BMW. And so what that means is that they've got better toys than the rest of us. So someday I'm going to go get to play with the Watson IoT BMWs. They've instrumented them to do all sorts of cool IoT things. But of course, even if you don't have a BMW to play with, it is still really important to have, there still is a lot of value in enjoying work. And this, if you go back several thousand years, Aristotle said, pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. So, that this is a really old and well understood idea that if you like what you're doing, you're going to do it better than if you don't. And this, this is old, but we see the exact same thing in modern research. So fun is good for business, and there's a lot of research that shows this. And in particular, if employees are having fun, then what you get is you get less sick leave, so that they're happier, and that makes them healthier. If they're healthier, they take less time off work, and so as an employer, the employer gets more productivity. They work harder, So that, even though it seems counterintuitive, they're actually working harder because they're having fun. And so ultimately what that means is they're going to be more productive. And there's metrics for this as well. So one study showed that your brain at positive is 31% more productive than it is at negative, neutral, or stressed. So 31% is a huge difference. If you could go to your employer and say, hey, I've got a way to make us 31% more productive, your employer would go, great, tell me what I need to do. But of course you think, well, it's not that easy. It's not so easy to just go from a negative workplace to a positive workplace. It's not so easy to go from not having fun to having fun. And that's sort of true, but it's sort of not true. Because in fact, in some ways, having fun at work is literally as easy as watching cat videos. Because they did a study, and they gave people a test, and some people, before they did the test, got to watch a comedy video. It didn't specify what the comedy video was, but since this is 2019, I think it's safe to assume it was a cat video. And what they found was people who had watched the comedy video were 12% more productive than people who hadn't watched the comedy video. So really, it's as easy as watching cat videos, which is awesome. And I think the reason why cat videos help productivity is just because your brain needs breaks. Everybody's brain needs breaks. And if you're working really hard and if you're trying to solve a problem, you need that opportunity to step back, let your unconscious work away on the problem. And that's also why they say that the best debugging tool is a good night's sleep, is because you need the time away from the problem to solve the problem. But also, if you're having to be really disciplined and you're having to, suppress a lot of the things that you'd like to be doing, you can only do that for so long before it just becomes too much. So just sort of having that moment to just sort of go away and go, oh, right, I don't need to be, on my best behavior. I don't need to be thinking really hard. I can just have a break. That really helps when you come back. Cat videos are good. If you have some sort of break mechanism that involves exercise, that's really good as well. So they did, there was a school in Canada, and what they did was they put the students on a treadmill between each class, and they found that the test results went up significantly because just that exercise helps the problem-solving ability. And there's other benefits as well. So this is a talk I saw a couple of years ago, and the starting point is that, of course, everybody loves Lego trains. And so they wanted Lego trains in the office, because who wouldn't want Lego trains in the office? And so what they did is they told their employer, you need to buy us Lego trains. And the employer said, why do I need to buy you Lego trains? And they said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to use these Lego trains in order to explore new technology. So we're going to install Scala on the Lego trains, and that's going to give us a good opportunity to learn Scala. And it worked, and their employer paid for their Lego trains, and they have this sort of huge array of Lego. And the employer has really been able to leverage this as well. So it was good business for them, because they found that then they were able to take the Lego trains and go to recruitment fairs. And of course, everybody wants to go to the stall that has the Lego trains. And then they were able to say, look, this isn't just a recruitment gimmick. We actually have these in our office. And people went, hire me, hire me, hire me. So, it is good business. But of course, there is a limit, So fun is good, but that doesn't mean that we can go to work and just do nothing but fun. So this is the last fun guy joke, by the way. That's multiple fun guys showing that you can have lots of fun. But there are limits to fun. So if you take this idea that fun is valuable, and then you sort of say, okay, I'm going to go to the extreme and I'm only going to do fun. I'm never going to wash the dishes. I'm never going to make the bed. I'm never going to do any of these things. Well, that's not going to work too well. We do need to do these other things. And in particular, fun is good, but that doesn't mean that everything that's fun is good. So if you look, for example, at behaviors like trolling on the internet, the people who are doing that are having great fun, but that doesn't mean that everybody else is having fun. So we really need to think about whether what we're doing is, is everybody having fun, or is this fun for me and horrible for everybody around me? So, is everybody having fun? So as a workplace example of this, where again, there was nothing malicious involved, unlike trolling. But a couple of years, well, many years ago, one of our developers wanted to learn Groovy. So that's fine. So he had quite a lot of fun learning Groovy, and he took a part of our product and he implemented it in Groovy, which was all fine until he then left the company. And then what happened was that everybody else was under, deadline pressures and that kind of thing. And they had this code that was written in a language that they didn't know. And they didn't really want to be learning it at that particular moment because, the reason they were looking at the code was that there was a defect and there was a deadline. And so there was, there was this sort of mismatch between the original fun and then the real lack of fun for everybody else. So fun is good, but like beer, you have to enjoy it responsibly. So far so good. Fun's valuable as long as you don't have too much of it. But then the key question is, well, how do I have fun? So the first step is to find the unfun things and get rid of them. Although actually that's not quite true. The first step is to stop prohibiting fun. So this seems like it should be really obvious, but a couple of times after I've given this talk, people have come up to me and told me about things that happen in their workplace, and I've sort of gone, oh, and then I've added it to the talk. I heard a story, and they had a culture where people would bring in cakes and leave them in the kitchen, and then they'd send an email around saying, oh, there's cakes in the kitchen. And HR went to them and said, please stop sending emails about cakes. I never really understood why, but it just made me so sad that, people were having cakes and they were told that they couldn't share their cakes at work. This is another one where it was a global team, and they were a support team, so they didn't really they had to work together, but they didn't really get very much chance to interact with each other. And so what they used to do was, this was back in the days when, LAN parties were a thing, and so what they'd do is after office hours, they'd all stay in the office, and then they'd play Doom or Quake or something like that together. And it was great because they'd be bonding, they really built up a rapport as a team, it created that team spirit, and it was outside of work hours, so there's no problem. But apparently there was a problem. And so their employer told them, if you're in the office after 5:30, you have to be doing work, which just seems to me like the most backwards idea, of, you can't talk to your colleagues unless you're doing work. Like, how does that help anybody? Anyway, and I just recently heard a story where someone was working away and their project manager sort of prowled up behind them, as project managers do, and looked at them and said, why are you smiling? You're at work. Work isn't a place for smiling. So this story I was quite shocked by, and it was in Switzerland. So I don't know whether maybe that's just Switzerland or whether this happens everywhere. But so, sort of step one for having fun at work is don't tell your employees they can't have fun, So then once you've done that, then you can go and you can find the unfun things. And the reason why getting rid of unfun things is important is because usually when we find something unfun, the reason we find it unfun is because we know in our heart of hearts it has no value. So we want to get rid of unfun things because they're probably waste. And a lot of us, I talked about the joy of programming earlier, but probably a lot of us at work don't actually spend as much time programming as we want to. We got into programming because we loved programming, and then we have this job that doesn't really involve programming. And, certainly that's true for me. I find that I spend less of my time programming than I'd like to. But, sometimes this can be fixed. So find the stuff that's stopping us doing what we actually want to be doing, and then just get rid of it. So about a year ago, I went to my management and I said, well, we're really short-staffed. So we need to cancel all of my meetings so that I can do, dedicated programming for this client project. And it worked. It was cool. They said, okay. So I managed to get rid of it, at least temporarily. Another thing that really drives a lot of us crazy is that we want to have that social interaction, but we don't necessarily want to be interrupted, because interruptions are just annoying. So what some teams do is, sorry, that hasn't come out especially well, but they'll say, because if you interrupt a pair, you're interrupting both of them, and so it doubles the cost, but people will need someone to ask questions. So you say you have a dedicated interrupt pair. They know that they're sort of on call and they're subject to interruption, but that means that everybody else is able to work without interruptions. And in general, because we do pair programming, we find it gives us a lot of leverage to resist meetings. So we say, look, we just keep our calendar free of meetings. Because if you invite one person in a pair to a meeting, that doubles the cost. And that allows us to say, no, think about this meeting, is it really necessary? And in general, actually, I would say pair programming is such a bringer of fun to the workplace. So one is in how it protects you from interruptions and that other crap. But the main benefit is that it protects you from code reviews. And code reviews are a misery for the person who's doing the review, and they're a misery for the person who's getting reviewed. And in general, sometimes they find problems, but if there's a really big problem, a fundamental design problem, if a code review happens after a week's worth of development, it's often too late to fix that problem. And nobody wants to be the person who says you have to throw away a week's worth of work. So instead, what will happen is they'll say, well, I don't like the position of your semicolon there, and you misspelt that. And so that, that's not adding value for anybody. It's just making people feel like they're doing the work. Whereas if you do pair programming, you move that review process way earlier, and it's actually fun for both people. Sometimes this works, sometimes this doesn't work, but I find often we do estimations and we do story pointing because we're told we have to, and there's not actually anything that we're going to learn from it that's useful. So in that case, we can just get rid of it. And it turns out that if you create your stories well, the number of stories is as accurate a velocity indicator as the number of points. So you can just save this whole meeting by just not pointing your stories. I talked earlier about how, sometimes you do just need to do the dishes. Sometimes you do just need to do this stuff. And so I was thinking about stuff like adding logging. Does anybody ever really enjoy that? Well, possibly not, but often the reason we're doing that is because we know that we've built something that's really good and it's about to go to production. And that does feel good. So sometimes it can be satisfying to do that kind of hardening work, even though it's not something that we might have chosen to do. Save doing that kind of work until we know it matters. Another thing about that as well is increasingly, this is all getting automated, which is awesome. So there's a whole bunch of manual work that we used to have to do that's automated away by observability tools, so that's cool. But really, production is the happiest place on the internet. So we want to have fun, but we want to have fun that matters. Another thing that I think is super fun, I'm a big advocate of test-driven development, and that's partly because it improves the quality, but that's also because it feels so good to sort of see the little red tests, and then you see them go green, and it's exciting. Automation, I think automation is one of the ways that we're really lucky as an industry, is because we're encouraged to automate things, and automation is so fun. And so at the moment, it may change, and the computers may come back and wreak a terrible revenge, but at the moment, no computer actually expects to have fun. So let's take advantage of this golden age and get them to do all the boring crap. Because there's sort of another benefit of it, which is that at the end, we don't need to do the boring stuff, which is good. And on the way, we get to play with the automation problems, which are really fun. Again, status reporting. Status reporting is horrible and boring. Don't do it. Just get the status in a place where it's available for everybody to see. Stand-ups, they have to be short. Otherwise, they're horrible. So keep the stand-up short, and it will work better. But a really key part with all of this is autonomy, and letting people make their own decisions. And when the example I had of my son who tidied his room, when we make him tidy his room, he's there going, oh, this is the worst thing ever. And he does it really badly. When he chose to tidy his room, he's like, this is really cool, I'm tidying my room. And so much of it is that if we choose to do something, no matter what the thing is, that fact that we chose to do it means that it can feel a lot better than if someone made us do it. So once we've done that, then we can go through and we can actually start adding the fun. So there's lots of ways to add fun. A really obvious one in a workplace context is gamification, because of course games have a goal and rules, and that seems to fit really well with the goals and rules of a workplace. And there's some things that have been gamified and it's worked incredibly well. So if you look at Stack Overflow, for example, and you compare it to previous support forums, The answers in previous support forums were always really bad, but because Stack Overflow gamified the quality of the answers, it just wiped every other support forum off the floor with that model. When we teach IBMers security, the way we do it is we have this boot camp, and it's gamified. So the way that you get the certification is that you have to hack the website that's hosting the certification, which is really cool. And it teaches the lessons, and it actually sort of shows you what you're supposed to be learning as well. I talked a bit about TDD. I think TDD is really just gamified quality. It's that red, green, and each time you go, ooh, I won. We see a lot of gamification of builds as well. So if you get things like, this is an extreme example, but if you get the sirens and the radiators and the traffic lights, nobody wants to be the person who does the commit and then sees the traffic light go red and everybody in their team turn around and go, ooh. So you have this incentive to keep it green. And it turns out that build gamification can be quite serious. So I don't know if you can read that, but this product is like an open source build gamification system. And they've got things like a shame extruder and the siren of shame. And so they've really, maybe taken it a little bit too far. We're seeing a lot of gamification in recruitment as well. So Uber apparently will gamify the recruitment. So if you get into a taxi, sometimes you'll be given, an assessment to see whether you're suitable to join Uber. And the military are using a lot of gamified recruitment. So some of the military games that you play are sponsored by the military, and then, if you do really well, they'll reach out to you and say, hey, you're so good at the game, maybe you'd like to do it in real life. Slack as well is a good example of a product that has a lot of gamified elements in it. So the first is the name. So the name Slack implies that you're not working, that you're sort of, taking time off, and the conversational style and the way it sort of has the happy little messages, all of that is quite gamified. But of course, with all of these gamified things, it will take you so far, but people aren't stupid. Or at least not all people are stupid. So eventually people will work out that they're being gamed, right? And people will go, wait a minute, you just tricked me into doing something that I didn't really want to do with this game system. And I think we see that with Slack a little bit now. That it felt like a great game when we first started. And now we have, Slack became a never-ending quest to clear a multitude of broken unread indicators, all unreads, all threads, bubbles on team icons. And then the theory that this tweet came up with, which I kind of love, is that Slack is actually just a big plot to get humans to train a neural network for marking unread indicators as read. So at the end they sort of say, once a fan, I live in daily fear. So some of these things that were fun can become unfun. And really with anything gamified, you get what you measure. So if you measure something and then you may not actually be what you wanted to be getting. But what about play? Well, so gamification, it's really easy to sell to the business. Play is really important as well because people learn through play. So there's sort of, as an educational tool, play is great. I talked a bit about the sort of that exploration and that play as well. And like one aspect of that is quirkiness. And that you can't sell to the business, but it's so important. So this is the old site for WebSphere Liberty. And the little logo for it was that, and if you hovered over it to expand it, it was peace, love, play. And that wasn't from marketing, that was from the developers, and they just said, yeah, this is, we love this, and we're playing with this. And you see a similar thing with Easter eggs. And what I love about this is this article on Easter eggs. It says that Easter eggs are actually because software developers hate their jobs so much that they have to insert the Easter eggs in order to relieve the tedium of their existence, which I don't think is quite true. But certainly Easter eggs are fun. So if you remember the Steve Jobs Next computer, it was a beautiful machine, and it was one of the first to have sort of Unix plus a graphical interface. And if you, I don't know if it translates, but does the expression, the word gullible isn't in the dictionary, does that mean anything? Okay, so it used to be that, when you were like 10, you'd go up to another 10-year-old and you'd say, hey, did you know that the word gullible isn't in the dictionary? And of course, gullible means that you believe anything you're told. So you go away and you look up gullible in the dictionary, and there it is. And so what Next did is if you look up gullible in the Next dictionary, what you get is it will find your user profile picture, and it will show you because you looked up gullible in the dictionary. So that's cute. Here's some, I love this because this was a production train from one of the teams. And they didn't have to do it, but they just put in like little choo-choos, and they put in a little fat controller from Thomas the Train and that kind of thing, just so that when, they made it literal. But really, with all of that, what makes it fun oftentimes is that feedback. I did something, I shaked the rattle, and it made a noise, I played with something, and I saw it. So with all that, then you think, oh, wow, fun's amazing. I'm going to go put fun everywhere. Well, it is definitely possible to fail at fun. So if you think about games development, which seems like it would be the best job in the world, but it's actually really not a very good job, because you don't get to choose to play the game. You're made to play the game because you paid, and then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes with it in terms of deadlines and tedious reporting and that kind of thing. So games development, not the best job in the world. Even something like a team building activity. This is an American statistic that 31% dislike team building activities. I suspect in the rest of the world, it's significantly higher. And particularly, I think one of the reasons why people don't like team building activities is that they feel like they're being measured on whether they're having fun in the activity. And sometimes this is literally true. So I heard a story about an office party. And what they did was, in order to make sure that everybody was having fun at the office party, they took attendance at the office party. But ultimately, the reason why those things are so bad, the reason why games development, is in general not a great job, the reason why office parties with attendance are so bad is because the other stuff didn't get fixed. So, if you add this layer of fun on top of a workplace that's terrible, it's not going to make it fun. It's going to make it even worse, really, because it's just going to feel fake and horrible. So to recap, fun is really important. To have fun, the first thing you need to do is you need to get rid of the unfun things. Once you've done that, you can go in and you can add your fun things. And if you try and add the fun things without getting rid of the unfun, it's just not going to work. And so with that, I'll leave it, and we can all go have coffee and cake, which is cool. Thank you.